Every time a big winter storm is on the forecast, we all see those same scary headlines, right? Power grid pushed to the brink. It can definitely make you wonder if the lights are about to go out for good. But what does all that drama actually mean for you and for your utility bill? Well, let's get into it and separate the real facts from the fear.
So, this is the big question, isn't it? The one that keeps people up at night when the temperature plummets. We hear about record-breaking cold and crazy demand for electricity, and it's totally natural to ask, hey, can our system actually handle all this? We're going to dig into the data and find out what's really going on.
Okay, first things first, we've got to get our terms straight because there is a huge difference between a power grid that's stressed and one that is actually failing. And understanding this difference, well, that's the key to making sense of all those news reports. To understand what's happening, you need to know who's in charge. For a huge part of the country, we're talking 13 states and DC, that's an organization called PJM Interconnection. Think of them like the air traffic controllers for electricity. Their whole job is to balance supply and demand 24/7 to keep the lights on for 65 million people. That's a ton of responsibility. So when you hear PJM issue a warning, what are they actually talking about? They're talking about this right here, grid stress. And this definition really nails it. It's an operational strain. It's about supply getting tight and, most importantly, some serious economic volatility. The best analogy? It's like surge pricing for electricity. Things get really expensive for a little while, but the system is still working. And this slide puts it all side by side. On the left, you have grid stress. The lights are still on, but behind the scenes, wholesale prices are skyrocketing and you're hearing calls to conserve power. It's an economic issue. On the right, you have grid failure. That's the nightmare scenario, widespread blackouts where the electricity physically stops flowing. The good news? What we've been seeing is stress, not failure. So what does this look like in the real world? Well, these are the warning signs you'll actually see or hear about. You'll see emergency demand forecasts in the news. You might even get a text from your utility asking you to turn down your thermostat for a few hours. And behind the scenes, they're firing up these expensive emergency-only power plants just to keep up. These are all the classic signals of a system under serious strain. Okay, now let's focus on that third point, those extremely high prices, because this is where things get really, really dramatic. The cost of electricity on the wholesale market, well, it can do some absolutely wild things during a deep freeze. So let's set a baseline. On a totally normal, boring day, the wholesale price for a megawatt hour of electricity, and that's enough to power about 750 homes for an hour, is usually under $100. It's a pretty stable, predictable thing most of the time. But during an extreme cold snap, whoa, that price can just explode. In certain parts of the country, that same megawatt hour has hit around $1,800. I mean, that is just a mind-boggling jump. And this chart just says it all, doesn't it? Look at the difference. The tiny little bar on the left is your average day, and that skyscraper on the right, that's what happens during a few peak hours of grid stress. It's not just a little increase, it's a completely different reality, and it shows just how tight that electricity supply gets. So you're probably asking, how does this even happen? Well, it's basically a perfect storm. It's not just one thing. You've got massive demand from everyone cranking their heat up. At the exact same time, natural gas supplies might be tight, and some power plants can even freeze up and go offline. Throw in huge, constant demand from things like data centers, and boom, you've got the recipe for a massive price shock. Okay, I know what you're thinking. Seeing an $1,800 price tag is terrifying. But here's the good news, and honestly, it's the most important part of this whole explainer. That crazy wholesale price is not what you pay. Let's break down why your bill is shielded from these insane swings. This quote really says it all. For the vast, vast majority of us, there's basically a big firewall between that chaotic wholesale market and the bill you get in the mail. So, how does that firewall actually work? Your utility company basically acts as a giant shock absorber. See, they're not buying all their power on that crazy real-time market. No way. Instead, they plan ahead and buy most of their power using stable, long-term contracts where the price is already locked in. So your rate, the price you pay, is based on the average cost over a long period, which smooths out those absolutely bonkers peaks. All right, so if that price spike isn't the real villain here, why do our bills still go up so much in the winter? This is where we really have to separate the myths from the reality of the situation. This table just cuts right to the chase. The myth? My bill is going to be $4,000. The reality? Nope, your bill goes up because you're just plain using more electricity to stay warm. Another myth? The grid is about to collapse. The reality? It's strained, for sure, but it's not failing. And it's important to remember, while most of us are protected, people on rare variable rate plans can get hit harder. But that's not the typical situation.
At the end of the day, the biggest hit to your wallet isn't some complicated market thing. It's simple consumption. When it's freezing outside for days on end, your heating system is working overtime, nonstop. And that massive increase in usage is what really drives your bill up, even with your normal, stable electricity rate. But look, even though our bills aren't directly tied to those price spikes, these cold snaps act like a huge stress test for our entire system, and they shine a really bright spotlight on the real long-term challenges we're facing. Like, how do we make the grid stronger? How do we keep energy affordable while we invest in new power lines and plants? And how do we manage all this new demand from things like data centers? These are the big questions these events force us to ask. So here's the big takeaway. The sky isn't falling and the grid isn't about to collapse tomorrow. But these stress events are a very clear preview of coming attractions. The real challenge for all of us is figuring out how we build a future grid that can handle more people, more demand, and more extreme weather, all without breaking the bank for everybody. So what do you think is the most important first step?